In just a moment, Sleep No More. But first,
here's the way NBC Radio cooks up a dish you're sure to enjoy. First, we take Eddie Howard and his orchestra, add songs by Dick Hames, and then blend with the music of Tex Beneke. We spice with comedy, sprinkle with games and contests, and stir with jack-of-all-trades, master of ceremonies, Bert Parks. And lo and behold, we have an NBC bandstand, a refreshing dish of entertainment that really gives you a lift in the morning. And the NBC bandstand won't add an inch to your waistline.
And now stay tuned for Sleep No More on NBC.
This is Nelson Olmsted. Sleep no more. Sleep no more. Turn down the lights. Sink back in your chair and don't look into the shadows. In the shadows, there may be moving things. Tonight, it may be you will sleep no more.
Good evening. This is Ben Grauer introducing tonight's tale of terror, told by Nelson Olmsted on the National Broadcasting Company's presentation of Sleep No More. The story of terror can be as simple as a sheeted ghost rattling chains. It can be a complex and hidden world of horror, lurking in such unholy dimensions as only the dead and the moonstruck can glimpse. Or it can be those terrible, fathomless shadows which lie buried deep in the primitive mind of civilized man. And for this evening, well, Nelson Olmsted, tell us about this evening's story.
Thank you, Ben. We have two stories tonight, and the first of these is by a favorite author of mine, a citizen of Roanoke, Virginia, by the name of Nelson S. Bond. Every time I think of this story, I'm reminded of a certain limerick which goes, "The other night upon the stair, I saw a man who wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. How I wish he'd go away." And that might very well serve as the theme of the first story. It's called Mr. Mergenthurker's Loblies. The faint tap on the door of my office gave me a chance to get my feet off the desk before I shouted, "Come in!" The door swung open hesitantly, and I saw him. "Yeah?" I said. He stood there, blinking at me apologetically. Tiny man, hardly more than 5'1", maybe 2, with sand-colored hair and eyes. His clothing was plain but neat, and he was nervous, and he said, Are you the man who takes the news?" "Who? Me? Oh, certainly. I'm the whole darn newspaper. I write the front page, lay out the ads, draw the cartoons, dig up the dirt, and sell the papers on the street. What do you want, anyway?"
Why, I just wanted to tell you there's going to be a murder this afternoon.
Well, nice going, Mr.
Mergenthurker. Henry Mergenthurker.
Nice going, Mr. Mergenthurker. You socked it right in the button that time. There is going to be a nice little murder this afternoon. A classic case with all the trimmings. I'm just writing the headlines now. D.A. slays maiden.
Oh, no, not the district attorney. Nothing like that. It's a girl up in the Bronx, a secretary named Hazel Johnson. She's going to be killed with a hammer.
What's the gag? You know the girl?
Me? No, never saw her in my life.
Then how do you know about the murder?
They told me.
He gestured vaguely toward the door with one hand. They? Who?
My Loblies. The big one's name is Japheth. The little one's named after me. They tell me everything.
Now, wait a minute, buddy. Are you trying to tell me there's somebody in this room besides you and me?
Oh, don't tell me you can't see them. So few people can. It's all because they will change color. If only they'd stay put. But no, they're forever...
Listen, Mr. Watsits, I got things to do, but worrying about your DTs isn't one of them. Now, scram! I pushed him, indignantly protesting, through the door. It wasn't 10 minutes later, the boss shoved open his door and let out a blat to high heaven. Holy Godshaw! Get McGuire and light out for the Bronx. There's a hammer killing up there. A gal named Johnson, Hazel Johnson. The funny part about it was there was no mystery connected with this hammer job. They caught the guilty man an hour after they found the body, and he confessed right off the bat. What I mean is, there wasn't one thing to connect my weird visitor with the case. So the affair bothered me. I looked up the name Mergenthurker in the telephone book and the city directory, but it wasn't in either one of them. I don't know just what I would have done if it had been. After all, you can't go to the Bobbies and say, look here, a guy named Mergenthurker has 2 green familiars who told him there was going to be a murder. So I puzzled over the thing for a week or so, and then it gradually dropped out of my mind and might never have occurred to me again if I hadn't dropped into Tony's joint one night for a drink. Now, the back room is a dimly lit little hole with only about 4 tables, and as I entered, I saw this Mergenthurker sitting at the best table with a beer glass before him. The places on his left and right had beer glasses, too, but no one was sitting there. The sandy little man looked up as I entered.
Oh, hello. Won't you join us?
Oh, not there!
Oh, you sit on Henry.
I took the chair across from him.
It's so dark in here. I guess you didn't see Henry, did you?
No, I didn't. Listen, buddy, I've been looking for you. How did you know about that Johnson murder?
Why, my Loblies told me.
Henry here and
Japeth? Yes, certainly. They tell me all sorts of things. For instance, did you know the Second National is going to be robbed on Tuesday?
The Second National?
Yes. 4 men in a blue car will hold it up at 3:30 p.m. Only the police will catch them. They're going to smash up the car trying to escape.
Oh, got all the details, haven't you?
I always have all the details. I had all the details before, but you... Well, it doesn't matter. Will you call Tony, please? Japeth wants more beer. I gulped and stared at Japeth's glass. Or maybe I stared first and then gulped. The glass was empty. And I would swear on a stack of proof sheets that I'd been watching Mr. Mergenthurker every instant since I'd come in, and he hadn't drunk that beer himself. Say, does he drink very much beer? Oh, barrels. Both he and Henry. But what can I do? If I don't buy it for them, they make scenes.
Scenes?
Yes, you know, pinch people on buses and whisper things to girls, and especially pretty girls and young girls. Oh, Henry's the worst. He just doesn't seem to care what he says to young girls.
Mergenthurker, either you're off your trolley or I am. You call Japeth and Henry Loblies. Now, what do you mean by that?
Why, that's what they are, of course.
But how or where did you get them?
I've always had them. Ever since I was very young. Japeth came first, but he was lonely, so after a while the little one came too. We named him Henry, after me. Of course, he was very young when he came, and he had some perfectly awful habits at first, but he's starting to get over them now.
Habits? What kind of habits?
Oh, lovely habits. Things like Widgeton and Rickentrokes and... What's that? Oh, well, Japeth says you wouldn't understand. Do you mind?
Not at all, no. Say, Mergenthurker, I've got to run along now, but I wish you'd drop in at our office again someday soon and bring the Loblies with you.
Thank you. I will.
I rose from the table, reaching for my hat.
Oh, Japeth and Henry say thank you for the beer.
I glanced at the table swiftly, and once more, the beer glasses were empty. At 3 o'clock the next afternoon, I hoped up a phony excuse to plant 2 of the boys and a cameraman in the Second National Bank. At 3:30 on the dot, a blue sedan drew up. 4 men stepped out, whisked briskly into the bank, covered the joint with a Tommy gun, scooped up the gravy, and moved along. At 3:57, their car, closely followed by my 3 men and the police, clipped an elevated post on 6th. And at 4:10, my sheet pulled the first beat this burg had seen in the past 6 years, a complete pictorial account of the Second National Robbery. I had just finished receiving the boss's congratulations, without a bonus, of course, when Mergenthurker came in. He was beaming delightedly. So, he said triumphantly. So, I agreed slowly. You were right. I don't know how or why, but you were.
Oh, it's my Loblies. They know everything.
Man, with Japheth and Henry to help you, you could be the richest guy this side of Hades. Do they know the result of horse races and lotteries and football games?
Well, I suppose so. I never stopped to think. Why, my goodness, I couldn't I?
Well, it looks as if. Here, won't you and the boys sit down?
Oh, no. Oh, my. Well, I never even thought of using Henry and Japheth to... Oh, will you come across the street and have a drink with us and talk it over?
Well, why not? I said. When we reached the street, he grabbed my arm and helped me back.
Let them go ahead, he whispered. Perhaps they wouldn't exactly like it if they knew I was planning to use them like that. I'll have to break it sort of gently and see what they think. I wouldn't want to... no, Henry! Henry!
Suddenly he left me and darted into the middle of the street in front of a huge truck, arms outthrust before him as though to push some slighter body out of danger. A horn growled, brakes squealed viciously, somewhere a whistle shrilled, and the pattering of many voices tightened into a murmuring knot in the center of the street. Numbed with fear, I elbowed my way through the crowd. Mergenthurker, his body grotesquely twisted, lay crumpled on the asphalt. I leaned over him and lifted his head in my arm. His eyes fluttered open and he recognized me.
Henry... Is he all right? There. Yes, I thought so. Then he is safe.
Now, you just take it easy, Guy. There'll be an ambulance here directly.
For me? Oh, no. I can't die. Japheth, Henry, what will they do without me? My Loblies, my lovely, beautiful Loblies. Nobody to talk with, nobody to buy them beer. And Henry is so young.
Listen, they'll be all right. Now, I'll take care of them.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
said Mr. Mergenthurker.
This has been Nelson S. Bond's short story, Mr. Mergenthurker's Loblies, as told by Nelson Olmsted. And now, sir, what's the second of tonight's stories?
It's something of a paradox, Ben. A chilling story of a heat wave. During the dog days of summer, have you ever thought what heat could do to your mind if you are nervous and excitable? This second story concerns two men who found the hot, oppressive, humid weather charged with mystery and weird prophecy. This is W.F. Harvey's remarkable narrative, August Heat. Fenistone Road, Clapham, August 14th. My name is James Clarence Wittencroft. I'm 40 years old, in perfect health, never having known a day's illness. By profession, I'm an artist. This morning, after breakfast, it was oppressively hot. And I'd just made up my mind that the coolest and most comfortable place in the neighborhood would be the deep end of the public swimming bath when the idea came, and I began to draw. The final result for a hurried sketch was, I felt sure, the best thing I had done. It showed a criminal in the dock immediately after the judge had pronounced sentence. The man in the picture was fat, enormously fat. I rolled up my sketch and, without quite knowing why, placed it in my pocket. And then, with a rare sense of happiness which the knowledge of a good thing well done gives, I left the house. I believe that I set out with the idea of calling upon Trenton, for I remember walking along Lytton Street and turning to the right along Gilchrist Road at the bottom of the hill where the men were at work in the new tram lines. From there onwards, I have only the vaguest recollections of where I went. The one thing of which I was fully conscious was the awful heat that came up from the dusty asphalt pavement as an almost palpable wave. I longed for the thunder promised by the great banks of copper-colored cloud that hung low over the western sky. I must have walked 5 or 6 miles when a small boy roused me from my reverie by asking the time. It was 20 minutes to 7. When he left me, I began to take stock of my bearings. I found myself standing before a gate that led into a yard bordered by a strip of thirsty earth. where there were flowers, purple stock and scarlet geraniums. Above the entrance was a board with the inscription, Charles Atkinson, monumental mason, worker in English and Italian marbles. From the yard itself came a cheery whistle and the noise of hammer blows and the cold sound of steel meeting stone. A sudden impulse made me enter. A man was busy at work on a slab of curiously veined marble. He looked up as he heard my steps and stopped short. Why, it was the man I had been drawing, whose portrait lay in my pocket. He sat there, huge and elephantine, the sweat pouring from his scalp, which he wiped with a red silk handkerchief. But though the face was the same, the expression was absolutely different. He greeted me, smiling, as if we were old friends, and he shook my hand. I apologized for my intrusion, and I said, "Everything is hot and glary outside. This seems like an oasis in the wilderness." And he replied,
"Well, I don't know about the oasis, but it certainly is hot. Oh, there's blazes. Take a seat, sir."
And he pointed to the end of the gravestone on which he was at work. And I sat down and I said, "That's a beautiful piece of stone you've got hold of." And he shook his head.
"Now, in a way it is. Well, the surface here is as fine as anything you could wish, but there's a big flaw at the back there. I don't expect you'd ever notice it. I could never make a really good job of a bit of marble like that. It would be all right in the summer like this. Wouldn't mind the blasted heat. But wait till the winter comes. There's nothing quite like the frost to find out the weak points in stone."
"Well, then, what's it for?"
"Well, you'd hardly believe me if I was to tell you it's for an exhibition. But it's the truth. Artists have exhibitions. So do grocers and butchers. We have them, too. All the latest little things in headstones, you might say."
He resumed his work. We went on to talk of marbles and which sort best withstood wind and rain and which were easiest to work, and then of his garden and of a new sort of carnation he had bought. At the end of every minute, he would drop his tools, wipe his shining head, and curse the heat. I said little, for I felt uneasy. There was something unnatural, uncanny meeting this man. I tried at first to persuade myself that I had seen him before, that his face, unknown to me, had found a place in some out-of-the-way corner of my memory. But I knew I was practicing little more than a plausible piece of self-deception. Mr. Atkinson finished his work, spat on the ground, and got up with a sigh of relief.
"Well, now what do you think of that?"
he said with an air of evident pride. The inscription, which I read for the first time, was this: "Sacred to the memory of James Clarence Withencroft, born January 18th, 1902. He passed away very suddenly on August 14th, 1942. In the midst of life, we are in death." For some time I sat in silence, and then a cold shudder ran down my spine, and I asked him where he'd seen that name.
"Oh, well, I didn't say it anywhere. I wanted some name, and I put down the first one that come to my head. Why do you want to know?"
It's a strange coincidence, but the name happens to be mine.
And the dates?
Well, I can only answer for my birth date, and that's correct. But according to your stone, I will die today, August the 14th. Now, what about that?
Boy, it's a rum go.
But he obviously knew less than I did. I told him of my morning's work. I took the sketch from my pocket and showed it to him. He looked at the picture of himself being sentenced in court, and then he said,
"Oh, and it was only the day before yesterday that I told Maria there was no such things as ghosts."
Well, neither of us had seen a ghost, but I knew what he meant. "You probably heard my name," I said.
"And you must have seen me somewhere and have forgotten it. Were you at Clacton-on-Sea last July?"
I had never been to Clacton in my life. We were silent for some time. We were both looking at the same thing, the two dates on the gravestone, and one was right. We resumed our conversation at the point we'd left off. "You must excuse my asking," I said, "but since my picture of you shows you being sentenced in court, do you know of anything you've done for which you could be put on trial?" And he shook his head.
Well, I'm not bankrupt. Business is prosperous enough. Oh, well, 3 years ago I bribed the gravedigger with a turkey at Christmas. But that's all I can think of. He got up, fetched the can from the porch, and began to water the flowers. Twice a day, regular in hot weather. And then the heat sometimes gets the better of the delicate ones. And ferns, good Lord, they'd never stand it. I'll say, where do you live? I told him my address. It would take an hour's quick walk to get there. And I said, why? Well, now it's like this. We'll look at the matter straight. If you go home tonight, you take your chance of accidents. A cart may run over you. There's always banana skins and orange peels, to say nothing of fallen ladders. Now, the best thing we can do is for you to stay here till it's 12 o'clock. We'll go upstairs and smoke. It may be cooler inside. To my surprise, I agreed. We are sitting in a long, low room beneath the eaves. Atkinson has sent his wife to bed. He himself is busy sharpening some tools at a little oil stone, smoking one of my cigars the while. The air seems charged with thunder. I'm writing this at a shaky table before the open window. The leg is cracked, and Atkinson, who seems a handyman with his tools, is going to mend it as soon as he's finished putting an edge in his chisel. It's after 11 now. I shall be gone in less than an hour. But the heat is stifling. It's enough to send a man mad. Signed, James Clarence Withencroft. Well, there we are, Atkinson. I've written down all that's happened to us in this strange day. Have you finished with your chisel? Well, I say, Atkinson, what's the matter, man? You're as pale as a ghost. Atkinson, what are you doing? Wake up, man. Atkinson. Atkinson! Atkinson, what have you done?
You can turn up the lights now. You can look around you. Nobody is there, really. Everything is all right, isn't it? Step over here, Nelson Olmsted, and tell us about next week's story.
Next week, Ben, we again have two stories. This time, both are by the same author, Michael Fessier. They are called Over the Hill and The Man in the Black Hat. I know you'll enjoy them.
You've been listening to Sleep No More, an NBC Radio Network production directed by Kenneth McGregor. Mr. Olmsted's albums are recorded exclusively for Vanguard Records. Until next week, when Nelson Olmsted will again be here in person, this is Ben Grauer bidding you all good night.
Hear Bert Parks and Dick Hames live weekday mornings on NBC Bandstand.